y'all, welcome to Bowls with the Bard. My name is Cakes, I am your host. For today's episode of Cakes Takes, I am going to share my thoughts on the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory's current production of Hamlet in original pronunciation. But before I do that, I'm gonna get high. So before we get started, I have a few little full disclosure moments. First and foremost, I am a company member at the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory. So if it feels like I am heaping on praises that are undeserved, that is because I love them, I love to see them succeed, and I'm a little biased. And on the other side of the spectrum, if it feels like I'm being extra harsh with my critiques, it is because I love them, I know the standard of work that they are capable of producing, and I want to see them meet that standard every single time they produce a show. Number 2, I have performed in original pronunciation. This doesn't mean that I am perfect at original pronunciation, but it does mean that I have performed with actors who have received certification in original pronunciation. So I do have a familiarity with what the accent should sound like. This both means that I have an advantage as an audience member, but it also means that it gives me a unique perspective as a critic. And third, I went to see this show on Easter Sunday, and the cast was missing a cast member for religious purposes. As an actor, I know how much this can impact a show, so when I'm giving critiques about the performative aspects of this show, please take them with a grain of salt. I did not see the performance that most people will see. And now that that is out of the way, Hamlet in original pronunciation at the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory. So I don't really like Hamlet all that much. I have never really enjoyed any production that I have seen of it, and I certainly did not like reading it. But this production gave me a really unique perspective on how Hamlet should possibly be approached. I think this comes from a combination of the way that Terence Fleming, the actor who played Hamlet, approached the character, and also from the way that the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory encourages their actors to approach the text and approach their performance styles. If you've ever seen a show at BSF, you will know that the house lights do not go down when the show starts. The house lights stay up, and the actors frequently make eye contact with the audience. Terence used audience contacts to his advantage almost every time he was on the stage by himself, and sometimes when he was on stage with multiple people. I thought that this was incredibly effective in making the text more clear. And I also thought it was an interesting choice because this was the first time I've ever seen a Hamlet who didn't really seem to have everything figured out already, who wasn't feigning madness because he had a plan, but who was kind of figuring it out as he goes. Since Hamlet has the most lines in the entire canon, this makes Hamlet a much more interesting character to watch. A big choice actors who play Hamlet have to make is whether or not their Hamlet is feigning madness or actually going mad. Something I really appreciated about Terence's performance was that it was clear that his Hamlet was feigning the madness. I don't really have a particular choice between the two that I like to see, but I do appreciate it that it was clear that he made one of those choices. Director Chris Cotterman and the cast as a whole did a really great job of finding the funny and the lightness in this play, which is something that Hamlet desperately needs. There isn't a whole lot of it, and so wherever you can find itsy bitsy pieces of it, it is so crucial. I particularly appreciated that the relationships between Hamlet and Horatio and Hamlet and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were like very clearly good friendships. They laughed and they had good times with each other as well as the bad times. They also had a lovely staging bit involving Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern. My favorite part of this production, though, was that this was a diverse production of Hamlet. 5 of the 12 actors were Black. That is certainly not enough. It is still less than half. but it is far more than you will see in a typical non-equity production of Shakespeare. I also very much appreciated that the diverse casting came in the form of Hamlet, Ophelia, Polonius, and Laertes, rather than just servant roles. This added such interesting perspective to the play in ways that I wouldn't have originally imagined. I was particularly struck by the way in which Shaq Stewart interacted with almost everybody on stage. He played Polonius, he was definitely an old man, but he was not your typical bumbling white old Polonius that you usually see. The way that he interacted with people had a different kind of friendliness and kinship that I'm not used to seeing with Polonius, and it was a really interesting direction. Getting to see a production with new perspectives like that made me excited for the first time that I'll get to see an all-Black production of Hamlet, or just Shakespeare in general from the perspective of entirely people of color, which is something I encourage the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory to pursue. The fight choreography in this production was badass. I apologize, I volunteered the day that I went to see the show, and so I did not pick up a program, and I am not sure who the fight choreographer is. It's generally Tegan Williams, that's who I'm going to assume it is, but I am so sorry if that is not who it is. The fight choreography at the end of this production, the fight between Laertes, played by Joshua Street, and Hamlet, was the best fight choreography that I've seen on an equity or non-equity stage in years. And on top of that, it was not just the best fight choreography, it was the best executed fight choreography I've seen in a long time. My heart was racing, I was totally in it, I didn't know who was going to win that fight, and it was awesome. And lastly, this production is 2 hours and 15 minutes with a 15-minute intermission, which is delicious. There were a few things that I thought could improve. First and foremost, there was energy and stakes missing from the production. This is kind of what I was talking about when I said this may have had to do with the fact that a cast member was missing. That can totally throw the energy of the show, and on top of it, it was Easter Sunday. I'm sure the actors were not thrilled about having to work, but at the same time, because I was volunteering, I happened to know that there was a 38-person house there on Easter, which is pretty good for the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory on Easter. So you should definitely still be energized while you're performing. Even though I have performed in OP, I have never actually seen a production in OP. This was really interesting for me because the people on stage who were executing the accent well were extremely clear to me. Now, as I said earlier, I have the advantage of having had worked with this accent, so it may have just been clear to me because I'm more familiar with hearing it. But what struck me was that about a third of the cast was really struggling with the accent, and those people were almost impossible to understand. So I definitely think it's worth it to start thinking about workshopping that accent with whatever cast that you have earlier. I think it's really amazing that when the accent is done well, it adds so much clarity, and I think it adds a lot for the actors. But when it's not done well, it really muddies things up, and then that makes it even harder for the audience because they're having to try to understand these people while also trying to have to adjust to it being done well. And then how do you ever really adjust if you're having to adjust to multiple things? And then lastly, the casting was a little too gender normative for my taste. The only ladies who were in major roles were in the roles that were written for women. They did have, I'm so sorry, I think it was Guildenstern played by a woman, which is something that is typical, but I would like to see a Horatio or a Laertes or a Polonius or a Claudius, you know, one of those bigger, more iconic, juicier roles played by a woman, even Hamlet. And something that I'm not sure that the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory has ever done, I would be super interested in seeing them regender a character instead of just cross-gendering them. But with all of that said, I think this is a really solid production of Hamlet. As I said at the beginning of my review, I really don't like this play, and I did walk out feeling like I understood what happened and excited about the way that they had staged it and excited about the new perspectives that particularly Terrence gave me on the character. So, if you want to see an interesting and cool take on Hamlet in original pronunciation, which, like, holy cow, you never get the chance to do that. You have 2 more weeks to see it at the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory before it closes. I highly recommend that you do. So, if you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to see more content like it, please like us on Facebook at Bulls with the Bard, subscribe to us on YouTube and WeedTube at Bulls with the Bard, and follow us on Instagram at Stoned Shakespeare. Bye, y'all!
Lay me where sad true lover never find my grave to weep there.